Welcome back. A reminder of the very latest from the uprising in Libya. The country's leader has turned up at a pro-government rally in the capital, Tripoli, defiant as ever, promising to fight to defend his position. Defiance too from the demonstrators, some of whom faced another violent crackdown, and there are reports of yet more deaths. All this prompting an impassioned plea at the United Nations by the Libyan ambassador there for the killing to stop. An appeal echoed by the United Nations chief himself. Sanctions have now been slapped on Gaddafi's government by the United States and NATO. In the last hour, his second oldest son, Saif, has been trying to rally support for his embattled father.
I urge the Europeans to send fact-finding mission to Libya as soon as possible, because we are not afraid of facts. We are worried about rumors and lies, because facts are on our side.
Brazil currently holds the rotating presidency of the UN Security Council. After Ban Ki-moon's call for action from the Council, Brazil's ambassador said a final resolution could come as early as Saturday.
There is a sense of urgency on the part of the members of the Council, and this is reflected in our decision to continue this consultation tomorrow. And there is a possibility that we might come to a conclusion by tomorrow.
In neighboring Egypt, where demonstrations forced Hosni Mubarak from power 2 weeks ago, there have been scuffles between soldiers and protesters calling for speedier political reforms. Thousands rallied in Cairo's Liberation Square on Friday to keep pressure on the military dictatorship. Demonstrators are concerned the military is not moving fast enough to repeal emergency laws or remove men from Mubarak's regime. In the Yemeni capital, Sana'a, there's been a big show of support for the president, but nationwide, tens of thousands of people marched against the long-running rule of Ali Abdullah Saleh. He's ordered the formation of a committee to open talks with protesters who are demanding he step down. In Jordan, as on Fridays for the past 2 months, protesters demanded political and economic reform. There was a strong police presence in the capital Amman as calls were made to limit the powers of King Abdullah. The leader of Jordan's largest opposition group, Hamza Mansour, says people's patience is running out because of the government's slow moves towards reform. Anti-monarchy protests too in Bahrain, where there have been demands for the king and his government to step down. Tens of thousands of protesters gathered in Pearl Square in Manama, where 7 anti-government protesters were killed earlier this month. Friday was declared a national day of mourning for the dead. Officials say 3 ministers who caused crisis have been dismissed. AlJazeera has obtained pictures of what appears to be police firing at protesters in the Iraqi city of Fallujah. Demonstrations against corruption and a lack of basic services have turned deadly in the country. At least 12 people have been killed in anti-government rallies across Iraq. Tarek Basley reports.
The spirit of protest very much alive in Iraq. Despite the capital and virtual security lockdown, thousands took to the streets. Their day of rage inspired by recent events in North Africa.
Our demands is the following. First, prevent corruption by making laws to prevent that and apply it correctly for the favourite of the Iraqi people.
Soldiers searched protesters trying to enter Liberation Square. They barricaded a bridge leading to the city's so-called green zone government area. At one point, protesters threw stones at riot police, who forced them back against the wall. In the southern city Basra, around 3,000 also took to the streets to protest against corruption and a lack of basic services. Concrete slabs surrounding the Basra government building were knocked over. Clashes too with riot police in Mosul, where provincial government offices were set on fire. 8 years after the US-led invasion and the fall of Saddam Hussein, there's clear anger on the streets. Development has been slow to come to the country, and after recent events in the region, there are fears that anger could drive a broader call for change. Tarek Bazu, Al Jazeera.
In Tunisia, there's been another so-called day of rage against the interim government. Thousands of demonstrators in the capital, Tunis, chanted slogans demanding the resignation of former loyalists of the deposed president. Among the men they want out is the caretaker Prime Minister Mohamed Ghannouchi. After controversy over how she handled the crisis in Tunisia, latest reports from France say the foreign minister is set to resign. Michel Alliot-Marie accepted flights on a business jet owned by a supporter of the ousted Tunisian president. Unnamed French ministers have been quoted as saying she could be replaced by the defense minister, Alain Juppé. Police in Mexico have discovered the bodies of 3 people related to a human rights activist who was killed last year. The family claims it has been targeted by soldiers since reporting human rights abuses in Ciudad Juarez. Amnesty International has urged the Mexican government to do more to protect the safety of those speaking out against abuse. There's been a high turnout for the general election in Ireland, where the governing Fianna Fáil party is braced for humiliation. A voter backlash is expected after the boom-to-bust economic collapse and the $90 billion bailout, which Irish taxpayers are now saddled with for a long time to come. From Dublin, Rory Challens reports.
Enda Kenny is a man with every right to feel like he's going places. He cast his vote on Friday knowing the polls point to him as Ireland's next leader.
This is probably the most crucial and critical general election in the last 50 years, and the more people who vote, the stronger the message within our democratic system is.
Many of those voters seem ready for a change at the top.
I would have voted for the current government not to be in power, and for the specific reasons that they've just made so many bad decisions over the last, well, in my opinion, 5 or 6 years.
I actually went independent for my first choice. Why? I mean, everyone's kind of saying that Fine Gael are going to make a change, but I don't really feel that they are. It's pretty much the same.
The Fianna Fáil party, so long the dominant force in Irish politics, is facing election meltdown.
The party was founded in 1926, and since it first came into government in 1932, it has dominated political affairs in this state. And even when it has been out of government, the least number of seats it has had, it's never fallen below 60 seats. And often it has been above 70, and on a few occasions it has been above 80. So this represents a collapse for Fianna Fáil, and it will take them a generation, a political generation at the very least, before they can repair it.
Fianna Fáil took Ireland into the good times, but crucially they were in power when the dream went bad.
A banking bust, a $115 billion bailout, and years of austerity measures ahead do not make for a happy voter. All the main parties have promised they'll renegotiate the terms of the country's humiliating loans, but it's doubtful there's much room for manoeuvre.
The real masters of Ireland now live over the sea in Europe and New York. Whoever wins this election has a tough job on their hands. Rory Challens, AlJazeera, Dublin.
The United Nations is warning that Côte d'Ivoire is on the brink of sliding back into civil war. Post-election fighting between supporters of rival presidential candidates Alassane Ouattara and Laurent Gbagbo is escalating. Thousands of people have fled the economic capital, Abidjan. In New Zealand, violent aftershocks are shaking the shattered city of Christchurch. 123 people are now confirmed killed in Tuesday's earthquake. That total is expected to rise further because more than 200 people are still missing. Search teams from 6 countries have flown in to help local rescuers, but no survivors have been found since Wednesday. French fashion house Christian Dior has suspended its creative director John Galliano after he was accused of assault. Galliano allegedly made anti-Semitic remarks and slapped a couple at a bar in Paris. Police say he was drunk at the time and detained him temporarily. The British designer has been the head of Christian Dior for 14 years and was set to kick off Paris Fashion Week on Monday. This is Al Jazeera, and these are the stories making headlines. Libya's embattled leader has turned up at a pro-government rally in the capital, Tripoli. Muammar Gaddafi was as defiant as ever, promising to fight to defend his position. But the pro-democracy demonstrations continued, as did the violent crackdown against them. There have been reports of yet more deaths, all this prompting an impassioned plea at the United Nations by the Libyan ambassador there for the killing to stop. An appeal echoed by the UN chief himself. The US and NATO have slapped sanctions on Gaddafi's government. Meanwhile, his son Saif has been trying to rally international support for his father.
I urge the Europeans to send fact-finding mission to Libya as soon as possible, because we are not afraid of facts. we are worried about rumors and lies, because facts are on our side.
People fleeing Libya have found sanctuary on the nearby island of Malta. A U.S. chartered ferry carrying around 300 people, mostly U.S. citizens, finally arrived in Valletta. Malta's hotels are already reported to be full of people who fled Libya by air. In Egypt, where demonstrations forced Hosni Mubarak from power 2 weeks ago, soldiers scuffled with protesters calling for speedier political reforms. Thousands rallied in Cairo's Liberation Square on Friday. Demonstrators are concerned the military is not moving fast enough to repeal emergency laws or remove men from Mubarak's regime. AlJazeera has obtained pictures of what appears to be police firing at protesters in the Iraqi city of Fallujah. Demonstrations against corruption and a lack of basic services have turned deadly. At least 12 people have been killed in anti-government rallies across Iraq. The United Nations is warning that Côte d'Ivoire is on the brink of sliding back into civil war. Post-election fighting between supporters of rival presidential candidates Alassane Ouattara and Laurent Gbagbo is escalating. Thousands of people have fled the economic capital, Abidjan. There's been a high turnout for the general election in Ireland. The leader of the opposition Fine Gael party is hoping he'll be the next leader. Enda Kenny urged voters to turn their anger into action over Ireland's humiliating economic collapse. The governing Fianna Fáil party, which oversaw the boom to bust and the $90 billion bailout, is braced for an election rout. And those are our latest headlines. The news continues here on Al Jazeera after Empire.
As new media takes on all powers,
we are as determined as ever to hold powerful and abusive organizations to account.
And cyber disobedience exposes powerful governments.
Free expression has its limits.
Websites treated as hostile territories.
If we lived in Great Britain, 007 would be getting him.
Leakers as terrorists.
A dead man can't leak stuff.
And hackers as insurgents. We ask, who will win the information wars? This is Empire. Hello and welcome to Empire, coming to you from the prestigious School of Journalism here at Columbia University in New York City,